Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of Streamtime Sports. My name is Chris. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. Now, Nick, it's really exciting. When this podcast releases, we'll be about 1 month out from our first ever Streamtime Live. To think, Nick, we're over 250 episodes, and now we're going to have an event. It's not just for us, but a Streamtime event coming off of the back of the podcast and all the episodes we've done. Who would have thought we would have got here, Nick?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We've been contemplating this type of concept for quite a while now, but obviously we have the Streamtime Sports membership that we operate, which has lots of smaller, intimate events that we run right across the year at our events and in between our major sports pro conferences. But this one is a full-blown, standalone conference event that we are running. We're hosting. We're driving the core of the agenda and programming. It's quite exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And for those that aren't aware, it is going to be on September 13th in Amsterdam, which is also, if you're in the industry, probably recognize those are similar dates to IBC. As Nick mentioned, it's not, we're not officially a part of IBC, but through conversations we've had with people, we know that there's a bit of a gap in the market for some sports-led content. And we're hoping, with some of the speakers that we've got on board, we've got the Bundesliga, La Liga, BBC, UEFA, Dine Media, the DAZN, more coming to the event. That we were going to be able to put on something really nice that sits separately, but also complementary to the IBC event. So I definitely think, and you can probably speak to this as well, Nick, we understand the global appeal that IBC has, but having that separate event to the side of it attached with Sports Pro and having that sports-specific track of content going on really is something, if you're going to be out at IBC, which I imagine if you're one of our listeners, there's probably a decent chance, you should certainly be reaching out to us about more information on the event.
Yeah, definitely. Look, the IBC event, the International Broadcasting Corporation, or convention, I should say, is an event that is really one of the staples of the broadcasting wider industry and ecosystem. Tens of thousands of people come from across the industry. And as we all know, sports is more and more such an essential part of the conversation around technology, innovation, strategy, and monetization around broadcast. And so this event is being something that has had a little bit of a sporting flavor, but it seemed to be quite a bit of white space in terms of what was happening on the sports front that we keep getting approached about. Like, why don't you guys do something? Or this event's happening. So we've decided to take the move and launch this event, which we're really pumped about. We're really excited about the people that are not only coming who attend the IBC event on a regular basis, but also other people who don't necessarily attend that event. They're looking to come and kill two birds with one stone a little bit, look to come to this trade show for broadcasting and also come to a really sports specific event, which will probably have quite an impressive mix of rights owners, broadcasters, platforms, and of course the rest of the broadcasting ecosystem in the room. So really looking forward to this. More details obviously available on the website. Streamtime Sports Live is the name. It is on the main Sports Pro website. If you can drop the link, if you know that one, Chris, then mention it. Otherwise, you'll be able to find it if you go to the Sports Pro website, or just reach out to one of us and we can give you a bit of a steer.
Absolutely. But we'll move into the news coverage today, Nick. And the first thing we're going to talk about, it is a company we've been spending quite a bit of time on, but they continue to make moves. And the first thing we're going to kick off with is the newly announced partnership between NBCUniversal and YouTube, where they've signed a global strategic partnership that expands the distribution of Peacock, as well as collaborating across advertising, technology, and production. At the start of next year in 2027, Peacock Premium will be included with YouTube Premium in the United States. NBCUniversal has described this as Peacock's largest wholesale distribution partnership to date. Just some numbers for reference: Peacock has roughly 48 million paid subscribers, coming in at $10.99 a month. YouTube says it has 125 million global subscribers, so it'd be interesting to have that 125, how many are relevant in that US marketplace, but that comes in at $15.99 per month. The agreement means that YouTube Premium subscribers will also get access to Peacock Premium baked into their subscription. It comes with, Nick, some of our favorite shows like Love Island USA and Real Housewives, but it also includes some of NBC's portfolio of live sports, which is also the NFL and the NBA. It extends NBCUniversal's carriage deal with YouTube TV. It includes the corporation, like I mentioned, with advertising technology, which is quite interesting given Google and everything they do, as well as the fact that Peacock does have the ad-supported tier and how that might come together. And it also makes NBC Sports a production partner for select YouTube sports events and brings selected live NBC sports content to YouTube channels. So, Nick, we've seen similar deals like this in the industry, but why in particular is this deal with YouTube unique, or why does it catch your attention?
Yeah, look, I haven't. I mean, when I saw this announcement, I definitely reacted to it quite quickly because of Peacock's extensive portfolio on live sports. Now, YouTube and YouTube TV has been in the market for a long time and has really been, I guess, has become the market leader from an MVPD perspective. A virtual MVPD perspective. But someone like Peacock, who's been trying to cut through in a very congested market, has been struggling to turn that into profitability for various numbers they've shared through various finances. They have struggled to overcome the investment they've made as a platform, as part of the NBC ecosystem, to make that become profitable. So the opportunity to expand the distribution significantly and try and open up the doors to significantly more subscribers seems like it's really a must move for Peacock. They needed to do something that moved the needle enough to see if they could really up the number of subscribers they are getting to the platform. And on the other side, you look at YouTube, and YouTube is trying to be a bit of an aggregator, as they've done with YouTube TV, YouTube primetime channels in other markets. And they want more and more people and more content to come to their platform. So this is a pretty important deal for YouTube, pretty important deal for NBC. And the layer of that you mentioned around production partner is really interesting, given YouTube doesn't produce any sports events really at the moment. So what is in the future, in the imminent future, perhaps we might see YouTube starting to invest some more in media rights. Who knows?
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the media rights later on, but the one thing that I do think is a bit interesting here, Nick, is it feels like when we started this show, we were talking about OTT. That used to be even the focus of the media summit was the OTT summit. We talked a lot about OTT, and we talked about. I can remember my very first event out there now 7 years ago, which makes me feel old. And we were talking about subscription fatigue, but the whole idea at the time was cutting the cord, getting rid of the bundle. Why pay for all this content that you don't want? Just pay for what you want. But does it feel a little bit like the future of streaming is just aggregators and doing the bundle all over again? Does it almost feel like we've come full circle in its own way?
We definitely have. I think it's just the cable bundle is effectively reinventing itself. Just a shame the economics will never support the ecosystem in the same way. But I haven't seen the specifics on how the platform will be available, how much it will just be included in the YouTube TV platform, as well as a pure standalone product
Yeah.
on Peacock. Have you seen anything on that? Whether you have to pay
I
supplementary subscription or not?
I'm not 100% sure yet. No.
So depending on that will also be a little bit more of a litmus test, because the cable TV bundle is normally everyone is forced basically to pay something for Peacock through their distribution, their agreement they have with the cable TV operator. This, I would suspect, isn't quite of that nature, but it's hard for me to confirm that without knowing that little type of detail. But I suspect they'll probably look at it perhaps a dual model. Perhaps the YouTube TV approach might have a premium lens to it that might have Peacock incorporated into it, and then there is a supplementary standalone Peacock option to be made available to potential subscribers. But it's just, again, about being available and visible in more places. And as we've talked about, YouTube is really dominating the growth charts of engagement on the TV, and so having Peacock available in their ecosystem can only do wonders for their visibility and awareness, and probably save them a lot on acquisition, frankly, because they'll be already available, rather than having to invest a lot more into marketing and even into rights to get to basically move the needle on new subscribers altogether.
Well, speaking about the rights, Nick, that's, I guess, the interesting part of the conversation about whether YouTube will invest in more rights. But ultimately, through this partnership with NBC, they're going to end up getting access to the NFL, the NBA, the Premier League, as far as I'm aware. Premier League's shown on Peacock. So, what value, when we're having those conversations, do those sports rights have in those sorts of deals? Because, as you say, this potentially gives them the opportunity to access some of these major rights without necessarily having to be the ones that have stumped, put the fee up to actually go acquire those. So, is this a test run to see how well that those live sports rights perform on their platform before they decide to maybe go do it themselves? It's just, what is the value of those sports rights? Because it isn't just a sports deal, but what do the sports bring to the deal?
Look, they bring an awful lot to the deal. I'm not sure if YouTube looked through the lens solely of sport, but it looked at the package of Peacock as it stands, and sports is such a key component of the Peacock proposition that inevitably does play a role in that vein. Look, I think this deal is probably looking something like there's a minimum guarantee and commitment from YouTube in terms of revenue as part of this, on the assumption that they're making it accessible within their premium product all in. And then Peacock will be able to supplement revenue either through a joint revenue share or standalone, that they'll be able to drive through advertising revenue, because Peacock is run as a hybrid monetization strategy or approach. So there is those couple of layers that give Peacock the prospect of doing that. And how much YouTube's had to put on the table is a big question mark, how much they've had to commit to. But YouTube's so good at working out what they need to achieve in these things, and being bean counters to work out the mix there, that they also can dial up the visibility of it if they need to ensure that the opportunity of having this platform within the premium proposition is maximized. So look, it definitely moves the needle. I don't think it's a case of we're going to see what happens with Peacock on YouTube, and therefore we're going to now buy more rights as a result of seeing that performance. I think it's just more of we want to be more of a destination for customers and consumers, and this is one way of just adding more and more value to our collective mix of rights and content on the platform.
And I think that leads that nicely. And kind of the last question I have for this one is what this possibly means as we think about the next era of the streaming wars, as they're often called, in the sense of it does feel like maybe it's not official yet, but more and more the fact that technology partners like a YouTube or like an Amazon are seemingly starting to replace or fill where the traditional cable TV role was.
Well, they all are trying to be some sort of version of an aggregator if you look at all the different platforms. I think that the big litmus test here will simply be how quick until the next deal is announced. Because if you see one more deal announced by YouTube of a similar nature with one of the big players, that signals a major commitment to becoming this single source destination that really will blow some of the others out of the water if they do commit to that. But if it's just a one-off and they sit on this and just keep it as is and don't bring in your Paramounts to the same sort of level, then it is a test case. And if it's really just a distribution carriage deal and nothing more, I mean, the production side is a bit variable as to what that really means, then there's not much risk involved for YouTube here, and probably not much risk for Peacock either.
Yeah, well, we'll probably find more news later on. That always seems to be the way, Nick. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that as that progresses. Looking on to the next deal, sort of within a similar vein, but with its own individual context, is DAZN. Obviously, we've spoken about DAZN in many ways in terms of how they've gone about different markets. But now it's been announced that they describe it as a landmark partnership, quite bold statement, but nonetheless a big deal for them as they're looking to expand into the U.S., where DAZN is now going to be the streaming home for Yes and MSG networks from a regional sports network perspective. That will be across the 2026-2027 NBA and NHL season, so that's obviously coming up here in just a couple months. Fans will have access to the New York Yankees, New York Knicks, Brooklyn Nets, New York Rangers, the Jersey Devils, the Islanders, and Buffalo Sabres. We'll also include a 24/7 news feed, highlights, original programming, behind the scenes content. What they have said is users of the Gotham Sports app, launched by MSG, will be migrated directly into DAZN. So it sounds like similar to what they've done with some of the other platforms like NFL Game Pass, where they absorb that. Existing pay TV subscribers that already receive Yes or MSG will continue to get access to that content at no additional charge. They'll just have to go via the DAZN channels. So, Nick, we've had different guests on and spoke about it at different times. We've seen some of the struggles for RSNs in recent years. We've seen more leagues and teams have to go and create a more local D2C strategy. Could this approach of partnering with DAZN become a bit of a blueprint for how RSNs continue to operate in North America, where it may be easier to partner with someone like DAZN than maybe necessarily trying to go and do it on your own?
It feels like we're almost going, we're seeing something quite different here, which is that the Americans need to learn a little bit from the Europeans for the first time, where a lot of European sports has in some way been through a bit of this journey and experience of launching an OTT platform and realizing it's easier basically working with a partner for distribution and platform management and execution rather than managing it all on their own. And that's definitely a part of it. From what I've heard and seen, the Gotham Sports app was launched with a lot of fanfare. MSG's array of leagues and rights alongside Yes's were really up there with as good. If you lived in New York, it was pretty much a must buy from everything I could see as a sports fan. but the platform did not perform to the expectations that consumers were happy with, basically. So something needed to happen. They either need to invest a lot more into the platform, or they need to do something else. And finding a partner that can take all that heavy, the heavy lifting from a technological standpoint is a real must do, I think, for anyone like this who realize when they get to the sort of scale, because New York's a big market, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge marketplace that they're trying to serve collectively across New Jersey and New York. Um, that's not an easy thing to just do on the cheap. So I think they had to do something. Whether you'll see all the RSNs follow, or all the RSNs or all the teams follow this lead, I think they're very interested in it, on how they can hand over a lot of that responsibility, get paid a nice guarantee of revenue as a baseline, and share some upside at the top of that, and not have to deal the heavy lifting on the platform management, and just focus on production and content creation and feeding that machine. I think that's a place a lot of them want to be.
And I think, to your point, just to reiterate this for our European audience who maybe haven't heard one of our previous RSN episodes, I just quickly Google search what's the population of New York and New Jersey, and there might be some other surrounding states that also could have access to it. Talking about 30 million people. So, like, we sit
Yeah,
here and we talk
bigger
about
than Australia.
Yeah, so we talk about ESPN or NBC Peacock, that we just talked about, these big national brands, but that is by no means to diminish the size of some of these RSNs and how meaningful it actually is when they are going through struggles, and some of the bankruptcies we've seen. They are serving country-sized marketplaces, even at a local regional level.
It's a really important point, I think, because it can get lost when you get to that sort of scale. The risks are that it's harder to deliver this stuff, as we've talked about for years. And at that sort of scale, when you talk about serving a population of that, and I haven't seen any studies, but I'm pretty sure the New York region, New York and New Jersey region, is probably as hot a sports
Yeah.
hotspot as there is in the US, right? I think this means this platform has to be successful, and frankly, obviously, this is a huge opportunity for DAZN as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I saw enough TikToks and enough videos of New York Knicks fans after they won the NBA Finals that I don't think your assessment there about their fandom is far off. But now, Nick, looking at it from a DAZN lens, how much of this is telling us about their long-term ambitions of what they're trying to achieve, trying to get more of a foothold in the U.S., because it has primarily been sort of boxing and combat sports? Or is this really saying more about the fact that we know that there's this impending, always seeming IPO coming up, that this is just another way to put something else in the overall portfolio? So as you're looking at that balance, Nick, do you think this is more to say with what DAZN's trying to achieve specifically in the US, or more about, this forever looming IPO whenever it does come?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the DAZN have always been, sorry. I would say DAZN has always been a little bit opportunistic with this type of thing, and I think they've been missing that US component of their rights for some time. They had to come into the fight sports space, but mainly because they had no other choice. All the other major rights, all the major leagues at a global level, at the major top 5 leagues level, was all tied up with all the major broadcasters and platforms. And the RSN issues that we see today just did not exist when they first came to market. So really, this opportunity around RSNs is really quite new and fresh. It's really been over the last couple of years. I think the RSNs and the teams have really struggled to understand that they're not going to get the checks that they were getting from the local markets since the bankruptcies of Bally and the like have played out. So DAZN's got an opportunity to finally really put a flag down in the US, but in a way that's probably not the multi-billion dollar commitment they would have had to make for major league rights to really supplant. To mark themselves into the market. So this is definitely a nice and smart way to move into the marketplace. DAZN will have, though, the challenge that they have to educate the market on who they are. I mean, most of those New York fans will have no clue, unless they're fight sports fans, on who DAZN are. So they'll still have to work with the MSG and Yes Network to try and come up with an educational and awareness program to ensure that DAZN gain the visibility and awareness and buy-in, frankly, to be a trusted subscription platform of choice for these fans moving forward. Because otherwise, that could be a real tricky situation to play out. But I would be surprised if you don't see DAZN try and mop up a few more deals. I think they announced one more pretty quickly after this. So it definitely seems to be part of their new approach to the US. And I think it's a really smart move. Basically, because if it's a smart move, because if they are looking to IPO, which all the signs are that they are, or even just selling to a major investment firm based in the US, having serious US presence and awareness and visibility and audience is almost essential to get anywhere near the multiples they might be hoping for.
Well, the other part that I'm interested in, Nick, when we talk about that long-term strategies, as far as I'm aware, we came on the press release. It's just the 26-2027 season. So how much that signals long-term intent or potentially what could happen? I'm not saying this is going to be akin to some of the stuff we've seen in Europe where some of those contracts were, um, I don't want to say terminated, but did not reach their agreed conclusion from the off date. That short term, just to see how that goes, because it is just a one season thing, how much that goes, to your point, I think that would probably signal a greater sign of intent, their long term ambitions, as opposed to just something to try to continue to attract those investors.
Yeah, look, it's pretty low risk for them. They haven't had to commit to a 10-year cycle for this. And I think it is because the market, no one else in the market wanted to try this either. I think it was basically a very nice opportunity they got delivered on their laps, and they took it. And so I think it's a test case for everyone. If it works really well for DAZN, then they can double down and commit to a longer term agreement. But equally, if it doesn't, they can exit. And likewise for Yes Network and MSG, they can also determine if this is something that they're happy with, and not only get DAZN, but they can get enough data and insight as to how DAZNs work to be able to then go to the other major platforms and say, hey, what about getting us involved? Because remember, Amazon and Prime Video were kicking the tires a lot on the RSN world for quite a while.
Yeah.
They're trying to get some really cut price deals on access to those rights. So I think they have some sets of rights as well. So I'd imagine they'd be very interested to see how this plays out.
Yeah, we'll certainly keep an eye on that. And then the last one we're going to cover today, Nick, is the Commonwealth Games here in the UK. Those maybe from Canada, Australia, or other parts of the Commonwealth will understand a little bit more. But I guess for anyone that's American that maybe isn't as familiar with the Commonwealth Games, imagine the Olympics, but it's exclusive to people that were once colonized by Great Britain. That's the way. I know that's a bit of a funny way to put it, Nick, but basically anyone who is ever a part of the British Empire, there might be some more specifics to that, but more or less a mini Olympics for the British Empire, right, Nick? Is that about right?
That sounds about right. I think there's more. It's a bit more
Yeah.
nuanced, but yeah, we can go with that. Basically, they were ruled by the Queen at some stage. We
Yeah.
could probably go with, but yeah, that's part of this whole the Commonwealth used to be all the collection of countries,
Yeah.
which still is technically the case. But the weight and the power of the Commonwealth and its
Yeah.
existence is definitely not what it used to be.
Yeah. Well, anyways, there was a change this year before
Oh,
this.
I should add before you
Yeah.
jump into that, Chris.
Yeah.
This like people shouldn't sleep on the scale of the Commonwealth
Yeah.
Games. They were when I grew up, they were actually such a big competition. They were almost treated in the same level and status as the Olympics, because mainly because Australia would win way more medals in it as well. But this event is thousands and thousands of athletes competing on a host and array of sports that are a little bit more. A lot of them are relevant and aligned with the Olympics, but there's also some Commonwealth sports like netball that exist in there that would never make the Olympics that also
Yeah.
are in there for context.
Yeah, for sure. And for those who aren't familiar with the Commonwealth, Nick just mentioned it's Australia, but you have countries like Canada, New Zealand. You've also got the largest population in the world in India as a part of the Commonwealth Games. So yeah, to your point, like when
I
I
think
say a
Rwanda's
mini,
in there. I
yeah,
think
so when I say
Rwanda's in
mini
there.
mini
Yeah.
Olympics, like it is still big. But just if you're from the U.S., you wouldn't have ever been participated or cheered for it unless you just had family. So just sort of give a bit of context. But to go into it, Nick, the BBC has had the coverage of the Commonwealth Games since 1954. So you're talking about a nearly 60-year relationship between the two organizations. TNT Sports became the live broadcast partner this year for the Commonwealth Games as part of the deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, with this move to TNT Sports as the broadcast partner, there were over 600 hours of coverage planned. HBO Max, which is the streaming service within Warner Brothers Discovery and TNT Sports, made every sport and every event available. From a coverage strategy perspective, this was positioned as a premium multi-sport event using expertise delivered from what TNT had from doing the Olympic coverage. They launched the Commonwealth Games 360 channel, which combined live action, athlete stories, interviews, behind the scenes content. And then TNT Sports committed to using an on-site studio instead of primarily remote production with other things, augmented reality and analysis tools. So they really tried to take the Commonwealth Games beyond what had been with the BBC. Essentially, the BBC was limited to largely the linear broadcast, whereas TNT wanted to take what they'd done with the Olympics and broadcast everything. But one of the things here is for the first time in 60 plus years, the games were moved from a free to air coverage that they would have got with the BBC. The Commonwealth Games defended the switch, arguing that TNT's package delivered substantially more hours of coverage and greater access to athletes, which is that whole 600 hours of planned content across the streaming platforms. Some athletes, though, question whether reduced mass reach that you lose for free to air actually affected athlete visibility, sponsorship value, and just general overall public awareness. So I guess, Nick, when we're talking again, this isn't too dissimilar to what we were talking about with TNT Sports with the Champions League switch, although there's different context to those situations. But how much audience reach is worth sacrificing for a better commercial deal, Nick?
Well, it's particularly interesting for an event like this. Now, for further context around the Commonwealth Games, again, so in Australia, when I grew up, we didn't really have the Winter Olympics as something we would follow. We followed the Commonwealth Games instead because they would happen at similar, in the same year, because Australia doesn't have a big history in Winter Olympics,
Right.
but definitely does in summer sports. And so it was really one of the main events of the year that we would watch and participate in. But for what I've experienced and seen since, the Commonwealth Games has been on a bit of a downward trajectory for quite a while now. There's been an instance where very recently where Melbourne was set to host, I think, this particular games and pulled out relatively last minute in the grand scheme of things. And they had to lean into basically damage control to find a way out of all of that. So to your question about audience reach and we're sacrificing, I guess what's the goal here? For me, it shouldn't be profitability because it's an event run by a federation, which is shared by a host of nations. It is about driving visibility and awareness and building community around the Commonwealth. That's kind of the ultimate objective. But this event has had to reduce the number of competitions. It's had to reduce, I think, the number of athletes. And maybe they had to make this play, again, guessing here, but maybe they had to make this play because they weren't going to get that visibility, not only from BBC, but they weren't going to be able to make enough money to cover the cost of running the event. So they had to commit to a pay TV operator to make sure they got enough revenue coming from that stream to really sort of try and cover some of the costs, because they were in such a pickle, basically, with Melbourne pulling out so last minute. So I'm not sure if that's the case, but it feels like that definitely could be a part of it. Naturally, the optimal mix here would be there is a strong element of free-to-air plus a pay TV full access offer, as we've seen with most of the major events in the Olympics to date. But I think this might have been, the hands might have been a little bit forced, frankly.
Yeah. And do you feel like treating the Commonwealth Games akin to the Olympics is necessarily the appropriate strategy? Again, it's not to diminish the Commonwealth Games, but it's certainly not at that Olympic level. Is it an appropriate strategy for some of these, tier two events to try to, I don't want to say copy, but emulate the strategies that we've seen from some of these bigger events like the Olympics?
Yeah, I do think so. I think this event it is basically a mini Olympics in many, many ways. Just less countries, less athletes overall, and less sports. But a lot of the essence of it is still very, very similar. The challenge is just that you need to make sure you balance the production standards and commitment and the storytelling that a broadcaster is going to commit to this to a level that makes it viable to do so and be sustainable for the longer term. But I really do not know what the future looks like for the Commonwealth Games. I know they had to get through this event. I have no idea if there is a future one planned. And I used to be someone who used to follow the Commonwealth Games really, really closely. So I think there's going to be ongoing conversation about its future and how it makes sure it can build a sustainable model moving forward, because it's clearly been disrupted over the last few years with what's happened in Victoria and in Melbourne, and also even what happened with India. They've been very disruptive for a long time, but I definitely think that's the right approach, just as long as they do it on an efficient, sustainable way.
And has streaming fundamentally changed the way we look at multi-sport competitions and the way they should be presented? It doesn't even have to be multi-sports competitions. I think golf is another really good example where golf is technically the same event, but there's multiple things happening in different holes. And just, it used to be, if you think about broadcasts, they're going to follow the main storylines, where I think with streaming, you now have all these options to tell more of these stories. is that necessarily the optimum way to do things, Nick? Because obviously we can make the argument that, yeah, it's really great for fans because now you have access to more content, but that also comes at a production cost to do all those things. And, is that necessarily the right change? I guess is to say, Nick, and how streaming has impacted how we are able to distribute and consume these types of events.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's now an expectation that you've got access to everything if you're particularly if you're paying for it.
Yeah.
I think if you're not paying for it, it is a little bit of a different ball game. But if there's an element of payment, which if you have a platform like Warner Brothers Discovery have, no matter how you're paying for the HBO Max experience, whether it be through distribution partnerships or whatever, the expectation that you'll have access to those events and will feel really weird if you do not have that available to you. So I think it's an expectation. The balance is like, what do you serve? I've seen many instances where you might get a feed of a live event, but there's no commentary attached, or
Yeah.
there's something missing from the production. And actually, you know what? It's not so bad if you don't have the opportunity to get that and you want to watch it. So it could be a rogue sport. Let's say it could be, I don't know, it could be beach volleyball, right? Beach volleyball, I'm not sure if it's in this Commonwealth Games. It was previously and was a big highlight event when they had it in Birmingham. But I watched games where I don't think there was any commentary happening. It was just purely the feed. And I was okay with that because I knew I couldn't get it elsewhere. So sometimes just even if the product is a little bit lower than, say, the standard, that is okay as long as I have access. But with AI tools coming into play, you're going to see more and more automated commentary supporting and resolving that issue, I think, moving forward anyway. But I think it's pretty much expected now.
Yeah, I agree, Nick, and I think we talk about different courses for different horses. I believe is the expression over here. If someone's happy just watching the NFL free to air on Channel 5 in the UK, fair play. But if I want to pay 180 pounds for DAZN, which, Nick, it's that time of year again where they keep trying to take money from me for my subscription, and I will pay for my NFL Game Pass subscription, but I'll pay it when I'm ready, when it aligns with my paychecks and my nursery costs and all those things. But yes, you should be able to have the options if everything is being um, recorded and broadcasted. It's just, what's that price point?
Look, I completely agree. I think where it gets interesting or unique for an event like this is I don't think you could offer that sort of solution to this type of event. I don't think you can offer $100 supplementary product to watch extra vision of the Commonwealth Games, because it isn't an event that is driven by pure passion like following a team or a sport. You have an interest where you're going to be watching stuff that you don't normally watch. That's what makes the Olympics so special, and indeed what's the Commonwealth Games. I get to watch netball or athletics and things like sports that I don't watch very often, but this is the moment I get to tune into it. But I'm very unlikely to pay for that access when I've got so many other things to go for, because this is a major event which has that, I don't know, if you think of it like it was as an audience funnel, it's kind of like sitting in this middle ground of lots of stuff I'm moderately interested in, way more than other stuff, versus being right at the pointy end like the NFL and DAZN knocking on your door for that premium subscription that you'll end up paying. So I think it is a very different case, and I don't think OTT platforms that offer premium, high-end products will succeed if they consider that approach.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, I appreciate you taking the time to join us for this episode of Stream Time. Like we mentioned at the top of the show, if you are going to IBC this year, or you've thought about going to IBC, and maybe coming to Sports Pro Stream Time Live might be a little extra incentive to go do that. Definitely go check that out. Reach out to Nick or I for more information. And again, thank you for joining us for this episode of Stream Time Sports.
And before we go, I will say that event is apply to attend. So it is not guaranteed you can get access to it. So apply through the website, and maybe message us as well, and we can put in make sure that the team pushes you up the list, knowing that you're a listener. So keep that in mind. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.